Prynawn da pawb, thank you for joining us. Welcome, croeso to Maesteg Comprehensive's webinar that this afternoon is titled Supporting Pupils' Wellbeing and Sharing Their Lessons Learned Through Lockdown. So without further ado, I'm going to hand across to Dale Dudridge and Jenny Heath from Maesteg. Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. In true Teams fashion, I'm going to try and share my screen so that we can show you the PowerPoint we've prepared and also talk you through it. So if you just bear with me, I'm hoping that you can now see a PowerPoint slide.
Perfect, Dale, thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so yeah, as Richard was saying, first of all, thank you very much for tuning in. Jenny and I are certainly aware of how busy schools are at the moment, you know, both in the primary and the secondary sector. So we're really grateful that people have taken time out of their days to come and listen to some of the things that we'd like to share about pupils' well-being, and, you know, hopefully learn from you as well in the discussion that we would like to have following this, you know, in terms of things that you may have done in your schools with respect to pupils' well-being, so that we can all hopefully kind of develop our practices even more. What this isn't as a webinar shouldn't be is a proposal of giving the answers to what well-being should look like in your school. I think every school does a lot of soul search, and certainly has over the last 12 months, about the best way of supporting not only their pupils but their colleagues' well-being throughout the kind of lockdown period. It's very much a snapshot of where we are at the moment, and we're not going to actually dwell too much on what we did through lockdown. Hopefully we can draw a line under the lockdown experience to some extent and start to look forward really to the next phase of school life. You know, that's very much our mantra with our children at the moment, looking forward to things. And what we hope we'll share with you over the next half an hour or so is some of the ways that we reflected on what we felt worked well for our children over lockdown, and how we actually want to build on that in very much a strategic and a practical way moving forward, so that we can be even better at supporting everybody's well-being within the school. And so we'd really appreciate any feedback that you've got, you know, on ideas and things that you think we may have missed. So, you know, we'd be very grateful for that as well. I think there's no doubt that the concept of well-being is very much on everyone's agenda, and perhaps higher on the agenda than it's ever been before, whether that's because of a result of it being so much at the forefront of the pandemic, where I think for the first time, you know, teachers and pupils to some extent were very much thrown into a similar situation, having to experience, you know, all of the challenges and the demands and the difficulties of existing in a lockdown situation, something that, you know, certainly in our generation, it wasn't something that we've ever experienced. And I think because of that, what we felt as a school is, as we were learning more about our own well-being, we were trying to use that experience as adults and, you know, talking as a staff community to be thinking about how we could best be supporting the pupils at that time as well. You know, everybody would have been aware of, you know, Kirsty Williams has certainly said it numerous times in various of her statements, we need to make the well-being of our young people such a priority at this time, because of course if we don't have happy children, we can't have happy learners, we can't have children who will function and will be able to learn in the way that we want them to. And I think certainly for our school, as with every school, overnight we went from all of the ways that we had traditionally supported pupils' well-being, which of course is so predicated on being in the building, you know, building those relationships. People can knock on classroom doors, we see them face to face. All of those things are the things that allow us to recognise when well-being may be an issue and respond to it there and then. Overnight, all of those things were taken from us, all of those usual kind of mechanisms that we use in schools to really look after the well-being of our young people. So as I said, what this presentation is about is really our thinking, what we did, what we want to do moving forward, how we want to learn from that experience. We're actually not going to focus too much on what we did for the well-being of our most vulnerable pupils. I think every school, you know, would have had their own mechanisms for looking after those children who perhaps their profile indicated a higher level of vulnerability over lockdown, and probably had highly specialist mechanisms involving multi-agencies at times to support those pupils. What we are going to focus more on is the well-being of all, well-being of all those pupils, and particularly those pupils for whom well-being may not have been an issue pre-lockdown, but over the course of lockdown and after lockdown did become an issue. So it's a double act from myself and Jenny Heath. Jenny, I don't know if you just want to come in and introduce yourself, Jenny.
Hi everybody, so I'm Jenny Heath, Acting Director currently of Health and Wellbeing at Maesteg. And since starting at Maesteg, I'll use the word inherited, Dale, I think that's okay, inherited what was the RSE curriculum, and that passion for wellbeing sort of began in that thread, and currently supporting on our new strategy for moving forward for what wellbeing looks like at Maesteg School.
Okay, lovely, thank you, Jenny. So where we'd like to start is to share with you some of the principles that are emerging for us as a school about well-being, what we learned through lockdown, and really what underpins a lot of the things that you're going to hear about this afternoon, a lot of the strategies and practical initiatives that we're introducing. And we've come up with kind of 4 principles. They are emerging, they are changing, they are being rewritten and refined as we learn more and more, particularly as our children come back into the building, and actually we're kind of testing what we think we know about their well-being with what they, through pupil voice and through those kinds of conversations that now can happen in corridors and in classrooms, what we're learning about those pupils. And what we're trying to do is all the time link our emerging principles with some of the key kind of documentation and thinking around well-being on lots of different levels. So our first principle at the moment is that well-being shouldn't be something that is only specific to what in a secondary school setting would be the health and well-being faculty or area of learning and area of learning and experience for health and well-being. It's much, much bigger than that. Actually, what we want to ensure is that health and well-being permeates all of the activities, the ethos, the experiences within our school. You know, if we are as a nation committed to that 2015 Act of the Wellbeing of Future Generations, which of course is all about ensuring that people are healthy, both of mind and body and spirit, we need to make sure that the experiences that children are having within a school in its entirety puts well-being at its very, very heart. The second principle that we have emerging currently is that we see well-being as being very much a bridge between what can be a traditional divide in schools between the pastoral and the pedagogical. I think where this really hit home for us was when, over the lockdown that we've just come out of, as a school, we were doing lots of thinking and discussion around the idea of engagement. How could we be confident that our pupils were engaged in the blended learning offer that we was offering them? What would be a fair way of measuring that level of engagement? And we spoke about lots of, you know, kind of apps and RAG rating that we could undertake as a school in order to kind of create an engagement profile for each of the children. But what that led to constantly was us realizing that the instant you start talking about a young person's well-being, actually you're bringing together what has typically been seen as the pastoral aspect of a school's life and what that tends to do in terms of a child's experience, and the pedagogical. So we always see well-being as acting as the threshold, as the bridge between those two things. The third principle that we are working on is the idea, of course, that an individual's well-being is not a constant or guaranteed. At the moment, as a staff, we are looking at a really great book, and I've given the reference there, Teacher Wellbeing and Self-Care. It's a really, really short book that's very much written looking at teacher well-being. But we feel that those two beliefs are things that we want to ensure underpins all of our education with both staff and students in terms of what well-being is. And that, of course, is that none of us is perfect, and at times in our life, well-being may become an issue for us. And we want to ensure that there's no kind of stigma around the idea of recognizing and talking about and accepting that well-being is such a crucial part of a person's existence. And last but not least, our fourth emerging principle is we want to ensure that well-being very much becomes part of our school's ethos and curriculum rather than solely an event. And I think, you know, Jenny and I very much when we started working on this about 12 to 18 months ago, well-being at that point in our school tended to be these special days, a well-being day where we would perhaps collapse the timetable and offer our pupils a range of experiences for them to develop their well-being. We would get external aid, external speakers in, and we would really make a big deal for a day. And then of course, the next day we went back to doing what we always did. And Jenny's going to pick up on this point later. You know, what we were concerned is having an almost tokenistic approach towards what well-being should be in any school. So we use the word ethos and curriculum both to mean the kind of feel of our school, the tone of our school, but actually the structure of our school, the way we deliver things in the school, the way that we build relationships and talk to each other and our pupils in our school. And we want well-being to permeate all of those things. So there are kind of four principles that sit behind everything that we're trying to do now. And we constantly go back to those principles and ask ourselves, have we got them right for our children and for our community? Do we need to tweak them? And possibly if we were delivering this in a week's time, I might be talking about slightly different principles at that point, because at this, you know, at this point in our thinking, we need these to have, you know, very much an organic kind of feel to them. So to put all of this in context a little bit, what I'd like to do is play you a short video that we've played together that I'm really hoping comes across well on your screen. We very much felt, and this is something that we feel very strongly as a school, we wanted our pupils to be talking to you today about their experiences of what we did as a school over lockdown to support their well-being. So you're going to see a range of pupils talking about that, and they will touch on some of the things that they did. And it's really interesting, actually, the things that they choose to foreground in this video as being what they found to be the most important thing for helping them. There's some quotations from parents. We've done some parent voice as well to get a little bit of feedback from them moving forward. I do need to warn you, I don't know if you're aware of where Maesteg is as a school, but we very much sit quite high up on a hill. And of course, in order to ensure that filming was safe and socially distanced, it's all outside. So at times you will hear the wind trying to compete with what the children are sharing with you. It's hopefully not too overpowering, but just to explain, you're going to get a taste of the Maesteg wind in this video as well. So please watch this, enjoy this, and hopefully it will give you a really good flavour of our school and what we're about.
Doing the wellbeing bingo because I feel like during lockdown I've been able to keep in touch with any of the teachers or any of my friends, and the teachers have been doing live calls to see how much of the wellbeing bingo we've been doing, and I think that's really good to keep us in touch. And I feel like the wellbeing bingo has encouraged me to go on walks for an hour or two and get some fresh air.
Throughout lockdown, everyone has struggled to some degree with their mental health. Being part of Maesteg School has been really helpful towards this. Wellbeing has took a massive step up within Maesteg recently, and I believe this has been really beneficial as many staff have been setting up challenges for all students to complete, and I for one have taken part in the wellbeing bingo.
I think I speak for everyone when I say that everyone's found it hard in lockdown, not seeing their friends. I think they honestly have missed coming to school and seeing the members of staff. So through Twitter, I know PE faculty have been sharing wellbeing bingo. I know myself, for example, has been sharing forms, and I have taken part in these. We did Wave the Swing, Wave the Scotland and back, and I think those little links that you have with the school while you can't come in is
edge us all in lockdown. And I found someone who struggled with online learning, not so much the academic work, but the feeling of being disconnected from school and the social side of just missing my friends, missing my teachers, missing like a school environment, as I feel I'm someone who does, I do prefer face-to-face lessons. Being taught in a classroom is something I enjoy, so everything being on Teams was a struggle. And I then spoke to one of my teachers about it, came into school, and I found that just a little conversation for an hour in school made all the difference.
They've gone out of their way to create fun activities, to create a community between pupils, staff, and not only just the school pupils, but the parents and outside links as well. I think having those links, I think, has really, really helped, not just me, but everyone in the school.
I believe it's really important that when we come back to school, this stays as a top priority for all students, as the academic side of learning will then follow. I believe this is incredibly important.
And now obviously we have the motivation station that is going to stay and be able to support us all. So I just hope that anyone who does feel like I felt through a conversation or just a visit to school, it really did make all the difference.
Hopefully that video played okay. Apologies about the wind in parts. You can probably see why I gave you a warning on that. But what that video does show is, I mean, as you can see, we're incredibly proud of our pupils and our young people up here at Maesteg. And I think what you saw there was a snapshot of what we want every child within our school to be able to do, and that's to speak openly and honestly about their well-being and feel confident that there are mechanisms within our school that can support them when and as they need it. So with those principles in mind, and with, you know, in terms of some of the things that those pupils were talking about that we did through lockdown and reflected on, we've come up with 4 really key strategy areas. So our first strategy area is really to ensure that health and well-being remains part of our community ethos, both inside and outside school. If we want our children to be healthy of mind and healthy of body, we need to be confident that they know how to do that, both when they have our support within the school building, but also when they are in their home, in their hobbies, in their free time. And likewise, what we learned through lockdown was the more we can engage the whole family in a well-being activity, the more support there is for the young person in really understanding the importance of it. So I'm going to pass over to Jenny now, who's going to talk a lot more about the specific things that we did and we intend to do to keep this strategic area 1 at the forefront.
Thank you, Dale. As Dale said earlier on, we're not going to spend too much time talking about all the things that we did, but when we reflected on what lockdown looked like for us, these are the things that we felt most strongly that we could carry on through, and that we needed to make sure we're still present when we were back in the physical school. And these sort of set up really our strategic 1 plan. The first thing was making it everybody's business, having this idea that we needed to shift the culture around well-being and make sure that everybody is involved in it. That was something that actually came really naturally during lockdown. Lots of our staff members wanted to be more involved, if they were much more aware of it. So there was a natural shift, a silver lining, if you like, because of lockdown. And we were much more prepared for it, I think, in the second lockdown, and much more vocal about how we wanted this to look. And it's now thinking about how we build on and change, make sure that that culture change has shifted is continued when we come back into the school. I think another thing that we want to continue to encourage is that staff's confidence in the engagement with pupils and parents, whether that's through social media or that's through engaging parents and pupils through our Teams online conferences we were doing, or phone calls, that again continues. Pupils were very involved in it, pupils were enjoying the activities and things we were putting out there, but that dialogue and language between pupils and the staff and the parents is something that we've had feedback on, that they would like to see more of that when we're back in school. I think when we were off, it was really easy to do that because it was a really easy way to contact pupils. But now we're back in school, we want to continue on with that and encourage that and build and continue to build the confidence in that, I think. As you saw in the video, there were lots of challenges that we set and lots of different things that we did to get pupils participating in wellbeing, and I think lots of schools were doing that, and lots of schools did that in their own way. But I think for us moving forward, it's about, you know, actually when we reflected on those things, there was a lot of things that we did because we were off school, or that we were teaching, or we were engaging in a certain way, whereas actually when we reflected on that, there's absolutely no reason why those things shouldn't have been happening when we were in school anyway, or those things that we could be setting up on a weekly basis, so weekly bingo challenges to get the kids thinking about not just what they're doing in the classroom academically, but, you know, taking time for themselves. That was something that we could be doing anyway. The motivation station, which we'll talk about a little bit more detail later on, well, actually that was something that we could look to re-establish. Now we're back in school, it may need to change slightly, but it's things that we can continue to be doing. So I think, again, when it comes to looking at the new curriculum and the planning for that, and the you know, the teacher autonomy we have with that, I think that we now need to start looking at that more when we come back in. Recognising and celebrating success. Again, there was a real feeling when we were off that, you know, we need to make sure that we're recognising, yes, success for the pupils and rewarding pupils who are engaging with the work and engaging online, but what about those pupils who are engaging with wellbeing activities and contacting their phone to just say, actually, I've been doing this, I'm really proud of this because I've had a really tough week and I've taken myself away from the screen, and these are the things I've did and I want to share that with you. And we've celebrated that through our weekly Student of the Week. And again, that's something that can quite easily translate to us being back in the physical building. And then the last point on here, which is is a really important point for us, I think, is this idea that during the second lockdown, it was very clear that relationships between staff, pupils and parents was building. And that was, I think, due to the fact that, and Dale and I have discussed this at length, that there was a commonality there. We were all off and we were all feeling the same thing. Pupils were feeling in a particular way, staff were feeling in a particular way. And I think that allowed staff to feel more confident in engaging maybe a little bit more honestly with the pupils, with a little bit more vulnerability to say, do you know what, I'm feeling that way and I understand. And it was because of that common ground. And when we come back into school, I think as a school, we have to be really mindful, and we need to think about strategies that we can put in place to actually replicate that again when we're back in school. How can we find out more information about how these pupils are feeling at any given time and have more understanding of how they're feeling so that we can react to that and have these lasting relationships continue to build. And I think emulating that when we get back into school will be really important for us moving forward, with continuing to build relationships and to build staff's confidence in talking about and engaging with how the pupils are feeling and how they're feeling themselves as well. I don't know if there's anything, Dale, you want to add to that slide.
No, not particularly. I think it's just that what we've become increasingly comfortable about as a staff body is having to be good role models of well-being for our pupils. We talk about role modelling as being such an important part of pedagogy, but actually it's a really important part of building pupils' confidence up in making well-being something that should be spoken about and should be addressed and considered. So strategic area number 2, what we wanted to absolutely ensure was that we developed a cross-curricular and collegiate approach to the leadership and implementation of anything that we did with wellbeing within our school. And I think, you know, we've really embraced the idea that, you know, just like literacy and numeracy and digital competence, wellbeing is the responsibility of all practitioners within school, of all people who work with children of any age. And what we absolutely don't want is to go back to where we were 12 months ago, where whenever you heard the word well-being, we used to gravitate towards the health and well-being faculty or area of learning experience. I would have a conversation with Jenny, I line manage that area. We would talk about perhaps what we could do in terms of the curriculum within that particular area of the school, or through extracurricular activities to address something that we wanted to do in terms of well-being. And actually, I think we were doing a really great disservice to to all of the other practitioners and subject specialists in our school, who, as we've learned through the last 12 months, have an incredible commitment to building, you know, and securing the most positive well-being for our pupils that they can. So this has probably been one of the things that I think Jenny and I are most excited about, that we've worked on over the last couple of months, really, to launch now that we're back in the school building. So Jenny, over to you.
Yeah, just to sort of echo what Dale said at the start there, I think that historically, with my experience with PSE whole school, like many other schools, it's felt that it lacks PSE, or what was PSE and now wellbeing, lacks a strategic overview. It's often delivered in isolation by a mixture of staff or by outside agencies, and it isn't really informed by anything or any data based on wellbeing. Isn't informed by anything except what that curriculum says. And when you teach it, or when you delivered on it, or when you got your external agencies in, it was sort of, like it says there, tokenistic. It didn't really link to, well, this is a current issue in our school, so this is the data we've got for that, this is how we're going to address it. So that was something that we're really keen to move away from, and we started talking about, well, what strategies and models could we put in place to sort of move forward with that, and that's something I'll be talking a little bit later on over the next 2 slides. I think moving forward in terms of having an integrated approach, it's the right time, it's the perfect time. Wellbeing's been given such a high status at the moment, and we've got more autonomy over our curriculum and what that looks like. And so now, thinking about that and starting to plan around that, the big question for us was like, okay, how can we take this wellbeing theme and wanting to really push this as, you know, being a sort of the overlying theme of what we're doing in Maesteg School, and how can we now create this as part of the fabric of our school ethos? How can we make sure that all areas of learning are involved in this? And how can we get the practitioner buy-in? Because I think we've, as we've said, PSE and well-being, and that has been very niche, and it's usually been pushed onto a PE faculty or onto heads of house or heads of year and so on. Or how do we change that? How do we get more people to buy in on it? And I think just understanding that we are now teachers of the child. We are not teachers of a curriculum. We are teachers of a child. And I think that, you know, we need to use this concept to continue to build on that idea that we had through lockdown. We were teachers of children, and we were focusing on the children's well-being. And when we used that to support our learning and our pedagogy as well. So what we've decided and what we've looked at establishing at Maesteg School, and it's been something that we're quite proud of and we're quite excited about, is this development of a health and wellbeing team, or a team of health and wellbeing champions. And I think the important thing there is strategically we're looking at these champions being from across all of the AOLEs and represented across all of the AOLEs, in the hope that, you know, we can make sure that our priorities for wellbeing are whole school, and that everybody's involved in them and everybody understands them. With regards to the health and wellbeing team, we did put it out to an advert, so we did formalise the role. We put out an advert and we asked for expressions of interest back from members of staff to be submitted as to why they thought that they would be interested in this, and what they'd like to contribute to it, and why it was important to them. And through the job description, we also, which I think is important to note, that we also try to encourage those people who were aspiring middle leaders to apply for these roles, and be the link between what well-being is going to look like in Maesteg School and what our strategy is, and how you can feed this back to your subject area and your AOLE to make sure that, like Dale said, it permeates through everything that we do. And our responses were really encouraging, really exciting. Lots and lots of responses, lots of people want to get involved in it. And I think, and then Dale would back me up on this, lots of people who maybe we may not have thought was really interested in this, who had a contribution to make, who maybe over lockdown really showed us that actually well-being is a priority for this staff member, or for this subject with regards to what they're getting involved in. And yeah, it was really nice to see. So the role of the wellbeing champion, now we have designed the role, we have decided what the outcomes we're hoping are going to look like for us. And I think one of the first things we're looking at is they are going to be supporting in this strategic approach to our vision. They are going to be going back to their faculties and saying, this is what we've decided as a wellbeing champion wellbeing could look like in maths, or how we can be looking at pushing themes for well-being in science, or what are we doing currently that would lend itself to this, so that is being taught, if you like, with ease and without even thinking about it, and it's being linked into topics and curriculum ideas that we're already having. I know that I've spoken a lot, sort of to give an example of some of the things we've been looking at. English is quite, it's quite a nice one where they've been thinking about, well, actually, what slight changes can we make in English? Could we change the type of book that we're looking at to link into the health and well-being theme that we have currently emerging from data that we've collected about our pupils? So that's one of the main roles. I think the next thing with regards to bridging the gap between the home environment and the school-based teaching themes, as we've alluded to earlier, I think a lot of this, some in the past, has been left to PE faculty, wellbeing faculties, or for those groups who have additional support. So your vulnerable groups have had a lot of support with this, and then we've sort of done a lot of work talking around, well, actually, what about those pupils in the middle? So you've got your pupils over here who are having a lot of support from the home environment with well-being and how they're feeling and expressing themselves. You've got the pupils over here getting a lot of support from, because they have additional support within the school. You've got P doing what they're doing over here, but there's going to be a lot of content that's missed. So to make sure that we're covering everything and bridging that gap, this idea of spreading the load across the AOLEs is going to become really important. We're also going to be doing a lot of work as a team, looking at and having a shared responsibility for diagnostic tools like Educate and Scodel, which are platforms for monitoring and tracking data of wellbeing, and I will be talking about that a little bit later on. But Educate and Scodel are the two platforms we've decided on, and the Wellbeing Champions will be responsible for going in and unpicking and looking at that data and deciding from that, really, what are we going to go after, because I think that's really important for us. What we go after in schools with regards to our wellbeing strategies, targets, what we want to achieve, it has to be based on what our pupils are telling us. It can't be an add-on. We have to base it on what our data is telling us. As well, we're also very aware that the new RSE curriculum is coming, and it's starting to build momentum now. And so mapping of that and sort of looking at where that could fit in across the curriculum is going to be really important for this team as well. Exploring and implementing new opportunities for a calendar of events. I think that, you know, as a school, we're very good at saying it's this International Women's Day, or it's Mental Health Week, or it's Anti-Bullying Week, and so on. I think, again, it's this idea of how do we map that so that everybody's involved, so that different faculties and different subject areas are picking up parts of that and playing their part in it. And again, it's that idea of making it everybody's business. And I think the Wellbeing Champion will be the link for that, to pass that back. And then just try sort of looking at this idea of triangulation, and I suppose making sure that everybody understands and things are transparent when it comes to wellbeing. So we as Wellbeing Champions would be working closely with programme leads, respective leads, and form tutors as well, and just making sure that everything we do is holistic and that everybody understands what our goals are and why we're going after whatever it is we find from the data, I suppose. Anything there? Okay, so in terms of mapping of wellbeing, I'm not going to go through this slide and read it for you. If I just let you take a minute to just have a little look at that, it just gives you a bit of an idea of how this wellbeing team fits into our strategy for mapping wellbeing in whole schools. I'll just give you a second to have a little look at that. You know, as a team, just as a faculty would have a FIP written every year, as a wellbeing team, you know, we are talking about having our own set of priorities and identified that we are looking to try and achieve based on what the pupil data is telling us, to inform what we're teaching, to form the language that we're using around our pupils. So we'll have that written in, and that should then all feed into what all of the other groups of people are doing to support wellbeing whole school. And obviously, if you have any questions on that at the end, we can go through it together in a little bit more detail.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. So that brings us to our third strategic area, which is really interlinked with that. In that we know that we're building this team that will have well-being as their priority, that will bring different perspectives to what well-being should mean for our children, both in terms of their ideas for well-being, but their own kind of subject areas as well. And what we wanted to make sure, we were aware that we was becoming, like most schools, I think, increasingly data rich in terms of the information we had on our pupils, but we wasn't as convinced that we were always necessarily turning that rich data into meaningful action. And I think in terms of that first bullet point, as a school, our journey has been very much to know how, very much about collecting data on progress and achievement and making sure that we have a really good picture of what the pupil can and can't do as, a learner in that way. We've developed aptitude to learning profiles, as many schools have. For us, it's called our Strive data. We look at respect for learning, mindset for learning, and independence for learning. And in each subject, that tells us something about the child's attitude. And for a long time, actually, what was missing was the well-being feedback. We had a lot on the perspective of the teachers on those young pupils, be it achievement or attitude to learning, but what we were very much missing was the child themselves being able to provide us with data in terms of how they were feeling as a learner, and in terms of what their general perception of school was, and how much school seemed to matter to them, and indeed their perception of how much school cared about them, and whether school was a place where they felt that they belonged. And we're now in a position where we hold 3 really, really useful sets of data about every single pupil in this school: their achievement, their attitude to learning, and their well-being. And it's actually in bringing those 3 bits of information together that we're able to respond to each individual child in a way that matters to them. It's, as Jenny was saying, we've become far more child-centric because of the way that we're bringing them into that dialogue about the profile and the information that we hold on those young people. And we went through a lot of work. I'm laughing because Jenny will remember the conversations we had where we were talking about what is the best way for us to really allow the pupils to have a voice in their own well-being profile that can feed into that. Jenny?
Yeah, as Dale said, massive priority for this year was to sort of just nail down what this platform was going to look like and what platform we're going to use. And I think over the last few years, we've started to get interested in it. We've realised that there's a massive need for it. We've been heavily involved in the Shern data and accessing the Shern data and making sure that we're up to date, and we're always getting that information, and we get that we've been getting that every 2 years, and we've been using it to the best of our ability. But obviously, with that only being every 2 years, it's not as purposeful as what we would like to make it completely pupil-centric. I've done a lot of research with pupil voice and trying to get information back from them. But again, just leveling this, getting a higher level of sophistication of what we can use, and researching, really, just doing our research, what is out there, what can we use, and how is it going to be purposeful based on what we're trying to get from it. We're trying to be a lot more proactive, so we don't want to get to a situation where we've got lots of pupils in one year group or lots of the same issue coming up. We want to try and be proactive and challenge those things early on, because we've got a wellbeing package, if you like, that's going to track that more frequently, as opposed to the Shern data that is every 2 years and then makes things quite reactive. And again, that builds into this idea of it has to be an individual needs-based approach if we're going to make sure that this is about equity and not quality. We've managed to find a data set, which again, I'm going to go into more detail on the next slide, that allows us to compare and contrast with real-time data. It allows us to create cohorts. It allows us to track things that we haven't been able to in the past, and look at, like Dale just said, with all of the data sets, it allows us to compare things across data sets, which is really exciting, because it makes it much more purposeful with regards to what interventions were put in place and what the impact of those interventions are moving forward. And again, we're going to look at the ethics inspection framework, and has being key and up there in the forefront. We have to find ways to say, this is what we view, this is what we've seen, this has been an issue, and these are the interventions support strategies we've used, and these are the improvements that have been made, or these are the ways we've changed the way these pupils are feeling, which will obviously then have a knock-on effect with their academic progress. So yeah, Dale, if you can just move on to the next slide, and we can talk a little bit about the platform that we've found. So we've found a platform called Educate, and I'm laughing now because Dale knows how long this platform took us to decide whether this is what we were going to go with and try and knock some of the money off that they were asking for when we signed up to it. But Educate, you know, we've started with it in September, and even through lockdown and things being the way they are, it's already proven to be massively invaluable. I'm not going to go into massive detail because it's so sophisticated. We could go on and on. But for us, the strongest aspects of this platform is that it allows us to collate things. It allows us to look at pupils on an individual level. It allows us to compare, contrast, and track. It allows us to any interventions that we put in place or any notes that we put in place with regards to what we're doing with individual pupils or groups of pupils. It allows us to save that. It links to SIMS, which has been massive for us. I think sometimes when you've got lots of data sets in lots of places and you can't compare things easily, that's been quite difficult. So this is a direct link to SIMS, which means we can look at attendance against confidence. We can look at attendance against self-esteem. And if you look at the picture on the screen, I know it's quite small, but when you open Educate and you see that pupil's profile and you have all of that information, and then you have the wellbeing survey next to them, it's really easy to read. Everything is RAG rated, color coordinated, and it just gives you an instant picture of what's going on for that pupil. And having shown this in the pilot, when we started, we used it and we were trying to decide whether it was something we were excited, we wanted to use. Staff were quite excited that the visual was there for them and they could compare that against data that they were used to looking at, or information on that pupil that they were used to looking at. It allows for multiple logins with regards to putting in interventions and looking at groups of pupils. I think it's still up for discussion with regards to who's going to have access, and I think Dale will back me up on that. Right now, obviously, the wellbeing team and heads of year will be looking at this data and breaking it down and seeing how we can move forward with it. But you know, in terms of form tutors using it, I think there's going to be some scope for them looking at it as well, to have a better understanding of what's going on with their pupils. And then the final thing that is really nice about it, it allows you to produce reports and case studies so that we can evidence really the interventions and track them over time. For us, finding a platform, it wasn't just about, you know, what's quickest, what's easiest, what's cheapest, what's going to give us these outcomes really quickly. It was about how can we use this data to go after the things that we think the pupils in Maesteg school need based on what we're seeing in front of us. Not let's go after self-esteem because that's a buzzword right now, or let's go after confidence because we wanted to go after the thing that it was what was being shown to us in the data for our pupils at Maesteg school. So I think that's why we're really excited about this platform.
Yeah, and of course, what the platform allows us to do as well is review our curriculum in all areas. So what we are inviting curriculum leaders to do is ensure that there are weeks within each half term, and once we have the results of our Educate survey, and we can recognise in different year groups there may be different issues around wellbeing, for that to become very much a priority within our curriculum at that point, and so that it's addressed, so that our children feel that actually, you know, in terms of all good feedback loops, they're giving us information and we're responding to that information as quickly as possible. Our final strategy area, and perhaps the one that we are even more passionate about, but the one that we're perhaps finding most difficult to really tease out, is we want to ensure that no child's well-being can ever be invisible in our school. I think all schools will always have the systems for those children whose vulnerability profile allows them to access, quite appropriately, quite rightfully, additional support. And there will always be children as well who will be more comfortable at displaying their well-being needs, sometimes in a less appropriate way than we would like, but to make it apparent to us that there is something going on with this young person that needs to be responded to. What I think all schools are always concerned about, perhaps, are those children who don't have the language, the confidence to be able to perhaps even recognizing themselves that there's a well-being need, never mind be able to kind of articulate it and ask for the help that they need. And lots of the things that we've spoken about already, particularly in terms of the way that we are developing our use of well-being data, will hopefully allow us to capture this more and more. But there were two last things that we wanted to share with you, which is really, I guess, the things that are most hot off the press, as it were, about things that we're doing to try and ensure that children are participating actively in their own well-being, as it were. You will have heard on the video, and certainly on the slide there, you can see the image that we used on Twitter to advertise what we called our motivation station. That was something that we ran during lockdown that actually came about when one of the students who was featured on the video actually popped up to school one day. She wasn't part of our on-site provision, but she actually wandered up to the school and articulated the fact that she needed help, that she was really, really struggling, and was probably a student that we wouldn't necessarily have known would have been feeling that way. And we realised as a school that we needed to have an explicit and transparent way for children to say, I need a bit of help right now. If I can have a bit of bespoke, boosted help right now, that might get me back to a kind of stable place in terms of my well-being. Our solution, I know many other schools had their own solutions. Ours was the motivation station. It was run by volunteered staff. It would allow pupils to book appointments. If they were telephone or virtual appointments, their parent could attend as well. Or if it was the pupil themselves, we had a risk assessed space where the pupil could come in and actually meet with a member of staff, because what we realized was sometimes what they wanted to see was a teacher. They actually wanted to be able to renew that relationship that they had with the teacher to help them out. So our teachers were outstanding. They volunteered to do sessions around their blended learning commitments and around their commitments for providing online support to the pupils who were vulnerable or children of critical workers that we had in also. And it was a range of things that they wanted. Sometimes we got to the heart of the fact that it was something to do with the technology and having to learn in this way that was proving really frustrating, and that was starting to affect them. They were getting really quite stressed about not keeping up with their learning, and in an hour we could sort that out. We could just give them a bit of a tutorial around it and they went away quite happy. With other children, we realized actually it was a much longer conversation, and what that teacher was able to do was make sure that the right people within our school were alerted to the fact that we needed to pick this young person up as quickly as possible. The second thing that we've developed is very much predicated on our belief that if our children are aware of and concerned for the well-being of other people, and people potentially outside of our school, people who are potentially less fortunate than the children in our school, it actually can strengthen and develop their own awareness of their own well-being. So we have developed our reward system. Very much it was something that was done over lockdown as part of our Respect curriculum. And what we've realised, and this was through pupil voice, is that actually what our pupils want when they get a reward is just to have a bit of recognition. What the pupils want is a well done. They want us to phone their mum. They want us to send a postcard out. They want to be bigged up. They want to see their name on Twitter. They want to be recognised. Actually, the external reward, and this is what our students told us, was neither here nor there. So what we now allow is all of our students went through a process where they voted for 3 charities. And what we do over the course of a year is raise money for a charity. And every time a pupil gets some kind of recognition from their teacher in terms of a merit, it's a little bit like what you see in supermarkets. They go and pop a token into a glass tub, linked to a charity, and then at the end of the year we will give money to that charity in terms of how our pupils have told us they would like that charity celebrating. So we're really trying to do some education around the fact that actually being mindful of charities out there that support people in different ways can actually lead to us feeling enriched in terms of how we consider our own well-being. And interestingly and possibly unsurprisingly, the charity that our pupils voted for, that will now be our charity for the next 12 months, is very much linked to children's mental health, and so we're doing a lot of work with that charity at the moment and celebrating them in that way. And I guess this is the area that we're now doing most of the thinking on. We've got lots of these ideas, and it's really to make sure that they do come together in a way that continues to put the child at the centre and allows them to be a really visible part of anything that's done with well-being in our school. So that's where we are. What we'd like to do now is open up the floor. We would really welcome any comments, any observations, any questions, any things that you may be aware of or doing that we might not be, so that, as I said, we can further refine this. And who knows, you know, in a few months' time, we might have part 2 of this, where you find that our lessons learned through post-lockdown might look slightly different to what we presented to you today. So, you know, thank you very much for listening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and just open up the webinar for some discussion. Thank you.
I was muted. Apologies. Huge thanks to Jenny and Dale for such a comprehensive presentation. I mean, the amount of thinking that you've explored, the complexities and the learning from everybody across the staff and listening to your pupils has been, you know, an incredible journey really that you've shared. I'm particularly taken with your approach to the cross-curricular champions, so yeah, I'd be keen to check in just to see how that sort of continues to evolve really in your work and your plans. But you know, I'm sure that the structure that you presented today, you know, and you've made it really clear that this is an evolving picture for you, but I'm sure it'll be of great interest to everybody across the region. And with that in mind, we'll capture that recording now and then hand over to any further conversations once we've done that. So diolch yn fawr iawn, it's really appreciated.